My name is Harold Bennett. I'm 88 years old. The garden grew back without her. I suppose that's what I keep thinking about lately. Not the hospital room, not the quiet house, not even the funeral. The garden. It's strange what the mind chooses to hold on to when everything else begins to thin out. I'm sitting at the small kitchen table where she used to sort seed packets. The wood is worn smooth where her elbows rested every spring. The window above the sink is open just a crack. I can hear the wind move through the hedges. It sounds almost like whispering, if you let it. I don't have many people left to tell things to. Most of the men I knew are gone. Our son lives 3 states away. He calls when he remembers. That isn't a complaint. It's just the shape of things now. I wasn't always a quiet man. I worked 42 years at the same manufacturing plant. Steel and noise and long shifts. I believed in providing, in keeping the lights on, in making sure there was food on the table and a roof that didn't leak. Her name was Margaret. She liked to be called Maggie, but only by people who meant it gently. She planted the first garden the year we bought this house, 1969. The yard was mostly dirt and broken glass when we moved in. I remember thinking she was foolish to try. The soil was stubborn, full of rocks, but she knelt there anyway. I used to watch her from the doorway after work, still in my uniform, boots dusty. She would be crouched low, hands deep in the ground, speaking softly to something I couldn't see. Sometimes I'd call out that dinner would be late if she didn't come in soon. She'd nod. She always nodded. The first year, nothing much came up. A few thin tomatoes, some crooked carrots. I told her maybe the land just wasn't meant for it. She didn't argue. She just saved the seeds. That was the way she was. Quiet persistence. Not dramatic, not loud, just steady. I thought I understood her because we shared a bed and a mortgage and a child. But understanding someone isn't the same as living where they live inside themselves. I know that now, or maybe I just feel it. The garden changed slowly over the years. By the time our son was in high school, the backyard was something else entirely. Rows of beans, tall sunflowers that leaned like tired men, roses along the fence that bloomed thick and red. There was always dirt under her nails. She would bring vegetables inside and lay them across the counter like treasures. I would wash my hands and sit down to eat. I never asked her what it felt like to coax something living out of ground that didn't want to give. I assumed she was simply passing time while I was at work. It embarrasses me to admit that. There are memories that come back sharp. One summer evening, maybe 1987, I had stayed late at the plant. Overtime. We were saving for our son's college tuition. When I got home, the kitchen was dark. The garden lights were on outside, casting these soft yellow circles across the grass. She was sitting alone on the little wooden bench near the tomatoes. I remember standing at the screen door and watching her before she noticed me. Her shoulders were slumped in a way I hadn't seen before. Not tired, just heavy. I asked her what she was doing out there in the dark. She said she was waiting for the heat to break. I said something about mosquitoes and bills and how it wasn't practical to sit outside at night. She smiled at me, a small, careful smile. Then she came inside. I didn't follow her back out. That was the pattern, I think. She would lean towards something. I would lean away. Not out of cruelty, just distraction, duty. The constant sense that tomorrow needed to be secured before today could be felt. When our son left for college, she expanded the garden again. More flowers this time, less vegetables. I teased her about it. "What are you feeding now?" I asked. She said, "It's not always about feeding." I didn't ask what she meant. There was a summer storm once, strong winds, hail the size of marbles. It tore through the yard and flattened half the beds. She stood at the window, watching it happen. I remember feeling annoyed. All that work, wasted. The next morning, I expected her to be discouraged, but she was already outside, lifting broken stems gently, tying what could be saved to thin wooden stakes. I told her it would be easier to pull it all up and start fresh next year. She shook her head. "They're not finished," she said. I don't think she was only talking about the plants. Years passed. The plant closed down when I was 62. Early retirement, they called it. I wasn't ready. The days felt long and shapeless. For the first time, I noticed the garden in daylight. It had grown dense, alive in a way that startled me. Bees moved from bloom to bloom. The air smelled different back there, thicker, almost sweet. She handed me a trowel one morning without saying anything. I held it awkwardly. She showed me where to dig for potatoes. The soil was dark and soft. When the first one came up in my hand, covered in dirt, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not pride, not exactly. Recognition, maybe. Like I had been walking past a room in my own house for decades without opening the door. We began spending afternoons out there together, not talking much, just working side by side. Sometimes she would hum. I never knew the songs. But even then, there were things she tried to tell me that I didn't fully hear. She mentioned once that she was tired more often. I said that happens with age. She said her hands hurt at night. I suggested warmer gloves. The signs were small, easy to fold into ordinary explanations. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday. Stage 4. I remember the doctor's mouth moving. I remember Maggie's hand in mine, calm, warmer than I expected. I thought of the garden before I thought of anything else. She asked if she would have enough time to see the dahlias bloom. The doctor hesitated. She squeezed my hand once, as if she understood the answer before it was spoken. Those months are a blur of hospital corridors and pill bottles and polite voices. But I remember one afternoon clearly. It was early spring. She insisted on going outside. I helped her down the back steps. She moved slowly, but she refused the wheelchair. The beds were bare, just small green shoots beginning to push through. She knelt. I tried to stop her. She waved me off. Her hands, thinner now, pressed into the soil. "It's waking up," she whispered. I didn't know whether she meant the garden or something else entirely. She didn't see the dahlias bloom. She died in late May, before the heat settled in. The morning after the funeral, I stood in the backyard alone. The shoots were taller already. I remember feeling something close to anger. At the sun, at the rain, at the way the earth kept moving forward as if nothing had happened. I considered tearing it all out. Instead, I went inside and sat at this table. Days passed, then weeks, and the garden grew. Without her, I didn't touch it at first. I let weeds creep in. I let branches tangle. I told myself it didn't matter. But one evening, I stepped outside and saw the first rose open along the fence. Deep red, full. It didn't seem right that something so alive could exist in a world where she no longer did. I stood there a long time, staring at it. Then I reached out and touched the petals. They were softer than I remembered. That was the first time I understood that the garden hadn't been a pastime. It had been a conversation, and I had only just begun to learn the language. I started tending it again because the alternative felt worse. The first few times I worked the soil alone, it felt like trespassing, as if I were moving through someone else's private space. I half expected her to correct me, to tell me I was crowding the roots or watering too late in the day. The silence was thick. There's a particular quiet that comes after someone dies. It isn't just the absence of their voice, it's the absence of being witnessed. For decades, no matter how distracted I was, she had seen me. The way I rubbed my shoulder after a long day, the way I folded the newspaper exactly in half before setting it down, the way I pretended not to worry. Out in the garden, I realized how often she had been looking. I found her notes tucked into a tin box in the shed. Dates, weather patterns, small observations written in careful handwriting. Planted early this year, risky. Harold home more now. Good light today. That one stopped me. I read it twice. There were pages where she had drawn small diagrams of the beds, arrows, circles, names of plants I had never bothered to learn. I sat on the shed floor longer than I should have, holding those pages. I began to notice things I hadn't before. How the morning sun reached the far corner first. How the soil near the fence stayed damp longer. How certain flowers leaned toward the house, not away from it. There was a rhythm to it. Not dramatic, just steady. The first year without her, I waited for the garden to fail. I expected neglect to show. I expected something to wither beyond repair. But it didn't. It adjusted. Some plants didn't return. Others spread wider than before. The roses climbed higher along the fence. The tomatoes came in late, but they came. I felt replaced, not by another person, by time itself. There is something unsettling about realizing the world does not pause for your grief. The mail still arrives, the trash is still collected, the neighbor still mows his lawn every Saturday at 9, and the garden still grows. One afternoon, I found myself speaking out loud. I missed it, didn't I? The wind moved through the leaves. No answer, of course. But I knew what I meant. I had mistaken her tending for smallness. I had thought of it as something secondary to the real work of life. What I see now, at 88, sitting here with hands that tremble more than they used to, is that she was building something I never measured correctly. Not rows of vegetables, continuity. She understood something about time that I didn't. I spent my years trying to secure the future. Savings accounts, insurance policies, overtime hours stacked like bricks. She placed her faith in seasons. She planted knowing she might not see the harvest. I waited to feel settled before I joined her fully out there. I thought there would be more summers. That's the part that sits heavy in my chest. Not that she died. Death arrives whether you're ready or not. It's that I postponed presence. I postponed sitting beside her on that bench without glancing at my watch. I postponed asking what she felt when the first green shoot broke through the soil. I postponed listening closely when she said she was tired. I told myself there would be a better time to pay attention. There rarely is. The second year after she was gone, I planted dahlias. I did it wrong at first. Too shallow. They struggled. I dug them up and tried again, using her notes as a guide. When they finally bloomed in late summer, I pulled a chair into the yard and just looked at them. No photographs, no phone call to our son. Just looking. They were larger than I expected. Petals layered thick, color almost too bright against the fading grass. I felt proud, but not in the way I used to feel proud at work. This was quieter, more fragile. I realized then that the garden growing back without her wasn't betrayal. It was continuation. It carried her fingerprints in the soil, her choices in the layout, her patience in the way certain plants returned year after year. And I am here, older now, slower, trying to learn what she knew without ever making a speech about it. Sometimes I sit on the bench at dusk, the same place where I once told her it wasn't practical to sit in the dark. The mosquitoes still come out. The air still cools gradually. The light softens until everything blurs at the edges. I think about that night in 1987. Her shoulders slumped, the way she didn't argue when I dismissed the moment. I can't return to it. There are no do-overs waiting in the shed. There is only this season. At 88, my body has begun its own quiet retreat. The stairs take longer. My breath shortens unexpectedly. The doctor speaks gently now. I don't fear dying as much as I once did. I fear leaving things unspoken, though even now I don't have grand declarations to offer. Only this: the garden grew back without her, and in doing so, it revealed how much had been growing all along while I was elsewhere in my mind. If you're still here, listening to an old man talk about soil and seasons, maybe just sit with me for a moment. Think about what's been quietly blooming near you. You don't have to say anything. Just notice. Thank you for listening my story.